friends. Welcome to Foggy Oak Fairy Tales, a stories podcast for all ages, where we tell farm stories from real life happenings on Foggy Oak Farm, as well as fantasy tales to spark both learning and imagination. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, friends. This month's episode is about a recent pig and goat escapade on Foggy Oak Farm, where the pigs broke through a fence and all the pigs and goats got out. And to give you a preview, boy, were they ornery during their bid for free reign of the farmyard. It's been hot here this week, like I'm sure it has for many of you. We've been replenishing water multiple times a day, running the hose over the pigs to help keep them cool, and otherwise trying to ensure all the animals and people are as comfortable as possible. But sometimes, in spite of our best efforts, the rising grumpiness needs and finds an outlet. In this case, the outlet was our fence, and the culprit was our pigs, followed by all the goats. It was around 3 in the afternoon, the hottest time of day here, and we were in the midst of a visit from a pest control company because our barn has become infested with carpenter bees. As a brief aside, I don't mind a few carpenter bees, but these had started to eat away at support posts in the barn, and it became evident that we were going to have a much bigger, major structural repair kind of problems on our hand if we didn't get ahead of this. If you've never run into a carpenter bee or don't have them where you live, they look kind of like a bumblebee. They make a very loud buzzing sound when they fly, and unfortunately, they make their nests in wood. They're not mean. Only females can even sting, and they don't tend to because they're very calm and not aggressive. I've never been stung by one, though sometimes they will kind of dive bomb you to scare you off if you're in an area where they don't want you to be, like near their nest. But they will, unfortunately, eat away at wood in a major way if they become established, and apparently, at some point in the last few years, they became established in our barn. So we were getting the barn treated to deal with that issue. During the treatment, which is applied to the barn wood with a sprayer, the pest control representative recommended that we keep the animals away as much as we can. So the kids took the lambs out to freely romp in the barnyard away from where the rep was working, though the lambs did keep trying to come up to him and say hello. And they had to be peeled away from following him around a few times. But the pigs and goats were in a pasture that still had access to the barn, so we needed to deal with them. I thought I was being very savvy. I decided to feed the pigs their dinner a little bit early, which would keep both the pigs and the goats distracted while the guy worked, because the goats have developed a habit of trying to sneak in and get some of the pig food during feeding time. This worked to a point. The pigs left their barn stall where they had been staking a claim to keep the worker out and focused on their dinner. The goats focused on the pigs' dinner as well. The lambs romped around the barnyard with the kids. I patted myself on the back for managing everything so well. The worker finished pretty quickly, told us to give it 15 to 20 minutes before we let the animals back in, and headed out. We kept the lambs occupied, and I went back around topping off waterers and feeding the chickens while we waited. At that point, we were all drenched in sweat, and I was covered in hay and corn dust from moving all the lamb food out of their stall for the treatment. I decided to go rinse off in the shower and left the kids to get the last of the lambs back into the stall. I was just stepping under the spray of the blessedly cool shower when I heard my daughter's bellow of "Mom!" ringing through the house. "What?" I called, figuring they were just looking for a toy or something now that the lambs were put away. My oldest daughter, Kathy, came running up the stairs, yelling something I couldn't understand over the noise of the shower. It sounded kind of like... So I shut off the shower and asked her to repeat herself as she came to a halt, panting, outside the door. "The pigs broke out," she gasped, "and all the goats followed them, and Buddy, our largest goat, got a chicken feeder stuck on his head and is running around screaming." Yes, friends, in those few minutes between when I had left things outside and stepped into the shower, absolute chaos had taken over the farmyard. The melee apparently began just as Kathy and my youngest daughter, Rory, had wrangled the last lamb back into its stall in the barn. Petunia, a surprisingly strong and impetuous kuni sow, had noticed that in my haste to get everyone away from the pest control treatment representative, I had spilled some of their food onto the other side of the fence. And Petunia wanted that food. It was hot. She was grumpy. And, more importantly, she was determined. Petunia began pushing on the fence panel to get at the food on the other side. To everyone's surprise, including Petunia's, the panel gave way and sprang open at the bottom, creating a large enough space to enable the subsequent mass exodus from the pasture. First, Pua, our largest sow, pushed past Petunia and made a run for it out of the gap between the fence and the fence post towards the house. Evidently, Petunia took her time to eat the spilled food that she could now access and then followed her sister Pua at a happy trot. Kathy and Rory, understandably, could not believe what they were seeing. As they were beginning to process the sight of Pua and Petunia trotting happily over to our patio and beginning to graze on the potted flowers, the goats noticed the hole and came streaming out as well. Unlike the pigs, who are new, the goats have gotten out into the barnyard before, and they know where the food is. They made a beeline for the chicken food and the chicken feeders and set to eating it with gusto. Sure enough, our large male goat Buddy was so eager for the chicken food that he stuck his head straight into the cylinder of one of the metal chicken feeders and promptly became trapped. The cylinder easily went over his head and down onto his neck, but his face was now covered by the bottom of the feeder so that he could not see. Buddy began wailing his displeasure, which echoed strangely inside of the metal chicken feeder, and was stumbling around as he tried to dislodge the feeder. "Meh!" he yelled. "Meh!" "Buddy!" Kathy and Rory exclaimed as they pivoted from the pigs to the trapped, temporarily blinded goat. And, of course, that's when Peaches, the youngest, smallest pig, and Petunia's daughter, noticed that everyone had left her alone in the pasture. Peaches is, on a good day, a pretty vocal pig. She squeals when she is hungry or excited. She squeals when she wants to be rinsed with the hose. She squeals if she thinks something interesting is going on that she wants to be part of. You get the idea. And those are pretty loud squeals. But Peaches, when she was left behind, was on a whole different level. She shrieked and howled her frustration as she paced the fence line, trying to figure out how she was the only one left behind during the great jailbreak. "Eee!" she wailed. "Wee!" I can't even do justice to it. And then she, too, found the opening and galloped out into the throng. Buddy, disoriented by the squealing and angry about being covered by the feeder, knocked it around so forcefully that the bottom of the feeder came loose and clattered to the ground. Now, his head was free. He just had the cylinder stuck around his neck, which was fine as far as he was concerned because he could resume eating all of the spilled chicken food. Kathy and Rory, knowing that the best way to get everyone back was to offer them a treat, grabbed a bucket and went to open the bin where we keep the goat and pig treats to scoop some out. Unfortunately, the goats also know exactly where their treats are kept and realized immediately what was happening. When I made it outside, still dripping, I ran into Petunia and Pua on the patio eating the flowers, Peaches racing around the barnyard still looking for Petunia and Pua, two goats trying to break into the feeders in the chicken coop to get more grain, and four goats with their heads determinedly shoved into the treat bin, eating as if their lives depended on it. This included Buddy, whose neck was, indeed, entirely encased in the feeder cylinder. I found Kathy and Rory, bucket discarded, attempting to wrestle the four goats out of the treat bin so that they could get a scoop of treats and coax everyone back to the pasture. Four strong, hungry, determined goats against two kids is, however, not fair odds, and they were not making much progress. They were also, to my relief, laughing while attempting to wrangle the goats away, exclaiming to one another how wild and silly this all was. And yes, it was both wild and silly, and their laughter helped me to see the humor in it as well. I started by hauling Buddy back from the bin and extracting him from the chicken feeder. As the kids helped shoulder off the goats, I grabbed the bucket and forced my way past them into the feed bin, emerging with a sufficiently full bucket of treats that I could shake it and produce a satisfying shunk, 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 shunk of the grains slapping up against one another. Sweet, big, 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 I called, shaking the bucket and walking over to the big gate in the pasture to get it open. Peaches, who still hadn't found Petunia and Pua, came trotting over immediately to get first dibs. Some of the goats were also interested and followed her. I began spreading the feed in a long line in the pasture, continuing to intermittently shake the bucket and call the pigs. Eventually, Pua turned around from her patio exploration and came running at me like a freight train, and a couple more goats made their way over. Petunia, seeing Pua coming at a mad dash for me, decided something better than the patio flowers was on offer and brought herself back as well. While I manned the gate, the kids wrangled the last couple of goats who were still exploring the chicken coop back into the pasture, and we closed the gate behind us with a relieved, "Oh." "Okay, kiddos, watch this gap in the fence and don't let anyone else out," I told them. Both of them were still laughing at the hilarity of it all, and I just shook my head as I trudged back to the garage to get my fencing repair tools. It was hot, this was annoying, but yeah, I could admit it was going to be quite a memory. I made it back to them and fixed the fence, while the kids jokingly scolded the animals for their misbehavior. It's been a couple of days at this point, and the fencing repair has mostly held, though Petunia has definitely been testing it during feeding time. We have all learned to be more careful about keeping the feed on the correct side of the fence, and we all agreed this was one very silly escapade that needed to be shared with all of you. Animals are always full of surprises, and I hope this was one that you can enjoy as well. Though I admit I hope it is not something that I get to re-experience anytime soon. That's it for this time. Thank you for listening. As a quick reminder, you can catch photos and videos of these very naughty animals on our Instagram at Foggy Oak Fairy Tales or on our Facebook page at Foggy Oak Farm. They're pretty funny and cute when they aren't being evil masterminds of fence destruction, so I recommend checking those out. And please take a moment to rate and review this podcast if you haven't had a chance yet. It really helps us reach new people and keep the podcast going. Thanks, and see you next time.